shall we?
No.
All right,
no,
hello,
no,
ladies
it's
and
not
gentlemen.
high. They're all higher than
Let's
you.
get a bit of energy in the room for the last hour. You heroes, you proud heroes of cinema. It's great to see you all here. So we're going to get into the next session, but first, I'm delighted to say there's a session of the cinema stories. A little film about a cinema that's actually 5 minutes from my house, which is nice. The Strand Cinema, 1935 Art Deco cinema, still working in Belfast. So yeah, let's watch that.
I was 12 in 1935. I was at the opening. We got tickets for the opening, and it was a Shirley Temple film.
And to go into a place with lovely carpet on the floor and rich velvet seats, you know, and velvet curtains, you know, it was a lift up, you know. And then for 3 hours you could be in a world of glamour.
The queues that we had outside the Strand at the beginning was just absolutely unbelievable.
We could have put anything on, literally, because with no competition whatsoever at all.
You had your doorman, you had your person outside who had your clickers. So, and everybody formed in queues to what screen they were going to.
People very much saw the world in black and white, but when you went to the cinema, you saw life in full colour.
When you're standing there, you're looking through the same porthole that a projectionist would have been looking through in the Strand in 1935.
There you go. The lovely Strand Arts Centre, proud Film Hub member as well, so I'm glad to say. Right, thanks so much everyone for hanging on for this panel, subtitled the Being Chippy About London panel, but also a more important subject that we're going to discuss today. So the title is Every Place Has a Story to Tell, and I'm delighted to be joined by two film producers and my colleague from Film Hub Wales, Hana Lewis, at the end there. So Lynn and Kate from Early Day Films.
That's right.
Yeah, producers of Bait, of course. And Hana Lewis is the strategic manager from Film Hub Wales. And what we're going to do today is we were also meant to be joined by Sara Gunn-Smith from Film Hub Northern Ireland, but unfortunately she wasn't able to travel to Bristol. So I'm going to be sort of stepping in a kind of per photocopy of Sarah's work. But we're going to be discussing 3 different projects. One titled like Bait, one made in Wales, which is Film Hub Wales project since 2013, and our own collective touring programme that we put on in Northern Ireland, discussing how regional audiences can be reached through regional work, and how the product of regional film industries can reach local audiences, how rural audiences can play a huge part in the success of films, but also about the ownership of films and the idea of public investment and how that can translate into ownership and understanding, and also what films can tell us about the places that we live in. So Hana, you're going to go first and you're going to tell us about Film Hub Wales. You have a clicker.
I do.
So go on ahead. There we go.
Oh, I didn't even click it. Thank you very much, Hugh. Yeah, I'm here to talk about Made in Wales. So before I tell you what that is, what I want to do is show you a clip of a film which was really nice to hear it talked about earlier, actually, The Feast, or Guelph. So let's try. Thank you, Laura.
Mae fel cell. Mae'n encil. Encil o'r byd. Popeth yn iawn, Cadi?
Besides.
Mae'r bwys y drws cefn. Bydd yn gariad eich eriolau neu di? Ni'n cael salsa, ffrwythau trefannol a chwningen i ddechrau. Bydd Gwyn yn siŵr o weithio ti ta fe seithodd y gwningen.
Glenda? Ti'n iawn?
Arbennig.
That's all you're getting. So, if you want to know what Caddy's up to and why she's covered in blood, then you're going to have to wait till April 2022 when it comes out via Picture House, or we're actually working with them to get some screeners, hopefully, some opportunities to see the film. So, yes, Made in Wales supports films like Well with Welsh connections. And what we essentially do is work with the whole film chain, filmmakers, distributors, cinemas, to offer tailored advice and create assets that we hope adds value to a film's release. And then obviously raises awareness with audience about Welsh films. So what I want to focus on today, I guess, is more of the why, like why we do this work, and then whiz through a bit about what we've actually done. So to set some super quick context, I should have gone to that slide before. Yes, we're celebrating films with Welsh connections. That's the lovely Sally Hawkins in Eternal Beauty. I'm going to keep clicking. Here we go. So yeah, just a couple of quick quotes from directors we worked with recently. You might have seen Censor, the lovely Prano, Aberystwyth Born. Just nice to share with you what some of the filmmakers we're working with said. So she has said that the support she's had from Wales in releasing her debut feature has been both immense and essential. And it's an exciting time, essentially, and what we're doing is throwing the spotlight on these films, and she hopes it will further highlight the creative potential bubbling in the country and give Welsh audiences even more to enjoy and be proud of. So I'm doing these at the start, just bear in mind as I talk, hopefully will become clear why I'm sharing these particular quotes. The second one is from our friend Lewis at Rolling Media. The film is Showdown. He said trying to break into cinema is a bit like a closed-off club as a new filmmaker. So the support that we were willing to offer has encouraged him to want to keep pushing making films specifically in Wales. And really nice that he said we're proving that there is an audience hungry for authentic Welsh voices and films, which is really nice. We like that. So, sorry, I'm trying to get through the clicker. What is Welsh film? Well, for us, it has to be really broad and inclusive. It's called Made in Wales, but for us, it's sort of more symbolic. It doesn't really matter if a film isn't shot on location in Wales. What we're looking for is a story, a sense of Welshness that we can use to tell that story to audiences. So we're working with heritage films held in the archive. We're working with Welsh talent, producers, directors, writers, so on. Films with government or agency funding, made by Welsh companies. Obviously films shot and made in Wales, Welsh stories, themes, and of course films in the Welsh language like Welsh. So, why do we do this? So this is the big bit, as it were. Why would we support a film like Welsh? Well, to start, I guess, what's been said to me various times over the years is that audiences they're not interested. in Welsh audiences, sorry. That they're actually just interested in genre, big names, and most interestingly, that Welsh identity is essentially tied up in British identity. Now, we think that's really interesting and forms really the core of what Made in Wales is. So when the hub launched in 2013, almost immediately cinemas started contacting us and saying, where do we get the latest Welsh releases? It just became really apparent that there was no way to find this out. There were no records, there were no processes, no data, and most importantly, no sense that it was even something that was useful to do. So to us, it seemed like a bit of a gap, obviously beyond the archive, that is. So what we thought was that surely that's going to link to a lack of public awareness as well, right? So we started doing some research, and we found out that Welsh films were actually, especially Welsh stories, were really popular with Welsh audiences. So that suggests that they do care, right? Because they were doing well. So what we started to think about was, well, can Welsh audiences even recognise themselves on screen? If not, how do other people see us? How does the world see us? Are we confined to Welsh stereotypes? If you think about Welsh film, I mean, I'd like to know, ask you, what do you think about? So I guess we sort of started to play devil's advocate and think, where's urban Wales on screen? Where are the stories from our Black Welsh communities? We don't... Yeah, I'll come on to that again. But to add to that, we also have a national language and maybe one feature film per year being made in the Welsh language, just one. So it's really complicated, essentially, and it just meant that we kept looking into all this and asking questions. Yeah, going back to sort of the lack of equity and exploration of representation on screen, we did a little bit more research. And in the 2019-20 financial year, we looked at 12 releases, and out of all of those, there was only one lead credited acting role for a black or non-black person of colour, one. And out of all the writers, directors and producers, there was also only one black male producer given a lead credit. So we started to ask more about this, essentially, and think, well, actually, what is this doing to our sense of identity? How are we seeing ourselves on screen? Because some stories essentially aren't being told. Sorry, probably don't need my sheet. It's all in my brain. But I do want to read this.
Speak your truth, Hana. Speak your truth.
No, I can't even open the sheet. So, yeah, I know. So what I'm saying, I know it has complex answers as to why we're only making one Welsh language film, but the point is that we're not able to shy away from that. We have to be ambitious and challenge ourselves and look at the statistics. So if we go to the question then of back, I said earlier, what impact is that having on us as audiences? What if we don't know or care about complex stories, and if they're not being shown on screen? Well, what we're essentially saying in Made in Wales is we do feel like this has a sense of, a direct impact on our sense of self, the identity that we see on screen, and then how the world around us sees us. So identity is quite a complex thing. It came up this morning, which was really interesting. Welsh industry bodies even struggle to articulate what Welshness really is, and how you might approach that, which we also found really interesting. So if you take a film like Three Identical Strangers, if anybody's seen that, or I'm Not a Witch, both created by Welsh storytellers, but maybe not, perhaps you didn't know, or I didn't know that until I was watching it and the credits came on, and I was like, well, the director of that, it grew up where I grew up, and it's that we find very interesting. What impact could that story have if it was known? What we're then saying is, if those connections aren't breaking through to audiences, really, do we just sort of stay defined by the stereotypes that do make it through? So I think we all know in this room, don't we, that we can't rely on the idea of a film being seen just because it's good enough. That's quite obvious, but I kind of, with Made in Wales, I often think about the analogy of a tree falling in the forest. That if you're not here to see it, you're not here to witness it, does it make a sound? That really rings true for me, because if nobody's championing that Welshness, what impact does it have? And that's really what we're questioning here. So we know there's Welsh investment into at least 8 features per year in Wales, but there are many, many more films being made with Welsh connections. It's home to the newest productions. We're investing in talent and skills, which we know is a huge push for DCMS currently, which are obviously really important. But what we're saying is if there is no financial or staff time investment into the distribution and marketing of a film, if there's no investment into those skills, are we really giving these films the best chance of success? So could it be making a greater economic return at the box office? And could that emerging director or producer or writer's story influence the next generation of young creatives? I mean, all these questions I'm posing is because we think it can. And that's what Made in Wales is really about. So we personally think there needs to be a rebalancing of funds, of stories, of priorities across the film industry chain. We obviously think exhibition is really important. But in Wales, there are no funds currently established to market films in this way. Fortunately, some of them can access, we were talking about the BFI Audience Fund. There are some ad hoc regional funds and BFI export funds as well. But there are very, very limited routes to get that support in Wales. We also have no distributors working locally with Welsh content, with Welsh stories, which we think is really important because it could make a difference. And we spent a lot of time looking at international territories like Sweden and Canada and our neighbours over in Ireland, who arguably we think are exploring their regional identity on screen in quite interesting ways. And the results of that can be national film magazines, big investments for budgets into international promotion, festival runs, and data collection to tell stories, all of which combined, all the things I'm saying, used to tell stories to audiences about themselves, the countries that they live in, essentially. So we feel, as I said, that this can also inspire the skills agenda, and putting it all together, that there's a sense of, like a mark of quality, and this discussion of brand, that if you explore it, it can be used as a tool to encourage audiences to go and seek out local content. I hope this makes sense. So I'm talking a lot. Okay, so click. Why does it always fail on the clicker? Yay. Quickly then, what do we offer? How does this work in practice? So, as I said, we are a film hub, so our main the people that obviously we're working with is exhibitions, so everything is designed with them in mind. But the lovely thing about Made in Wales is it works across the film chain. So with exhibitors we offer funds to actually take that sort of risk out of screening a film they might not know about that's Welsh. We offer previews in good time, we run events and have an online screening facility which all BFI fan members can access for free, and hosts international titles as well. So the catalogue we have has over 1,000 film titles on it now. So we've done a lot of work since 2013 to be able to say, well, actually, we do know where to find these films now and make it easier for exhibitors to book them. We do lots of nice release updates, and then the assets, which I'll come on to again in a sec. So the assets then, the filmmakers and distributors are benefiting, hopefully, through all of the things I've just said. They get their films previewed, they get promotion online and in newsletters, and then of course we're working with them to create these assets. I'm going to show you a picture of one in a sec. The assets, what I mean by that is when you get to audiences it makes sense, because we're creating podcasts, interviews, we're basically generating buzz around new titles and creating debate with audiences. And then industry alongside that, we're working, sort of prior to doing this, we realised that industry across Wales Screen wasn't really meeting up or talking that much. So it's just that added benefit of sharing information about films and working together more effectively. So. No? Hey. So that picture on the right there is a colouring sheet we did for Censor.
Just one colour?
Well, yeah, red. So they're downloadable for exhibitors. There's a few on our site. There's I think 3 options. So yeah, it's just nice to show you that. There's a few things that we've done. So yeah, just super quick, some stats. What have we actually done then since 2013? Well, we've supported, to our sort of shock, really, over 400 films. In lots of ways, I might add. So like some of those, we've helped to secure theatrical distribution. So films like The Toll, if anyone saw that, it was destined for VOD, and Signature very kindly worked with us and helped to meet the demand for in-venue screenings. So we were really excited about that. In 2020 alone, I put 2021 there, it's technically the financial year, with the help of Radha, who is here, Radha Patel, somewhere our Made in Wales officer, there she is waving, funded by the Welsh Government for the first time alone, we supported 70 cinemas, 67 filmmakers, 15 distributors, 40 production companies. So that's something we really couldn't have done without that support. Oh no, that looks bad.
You've broken it.
I broke it. I'm just seeing if I can turn it back on now. I just keep talking.
This is the future one.
No, this is people who can't use technology. Clearly, I'll go back. This is it. That's right. So yeah, we run Welsh Film Preview Days. We've done 15 since 2013. We go out on the road and we take films out to people. Yep, we've got our 1,000+ film catalogue, which is huge. The admin on that alone, you don't even want to know. Lovely curated film packages, obviously funding for cinemas that I've mentioned. Nice press and promo for the films. And then I've kind of left the jewel in the crown at the end, I think, haven't I, which is the whole story, which is fairly new. But it's a space that can host all of this, all of these podcast interviews. The thing on the right there in Welsh is a song sheet for Myfanwy, which is to accompany men who sing, which is also out currently. So audiences can sing along in the venue, which is just, it's just adding that value really and giving something for people to talk about. And what does the future look like? I'm almost near the end now. So what we really want is we want to do an online magazine, very much like Northern Ireland do, Sweden do this work, as I said, talking about other countries that are already doing it. But what it really is a space to create more appreciation and, importantly, criticism of film culture. We think that's slightly lacking at the moment. But we think that the work that we're doing is helping to foster that. So, and by doing that, we can pay people, we can pay freelancers, get them involved in industry, create career opportunities, create these nice assets that ideally then also helps the filmmakers, but it adds value to that release for the cinemas who don't have the capacity to do that, but are always looking for interesting things to do with their audiences. We then collate lovely data in partnership with the distributors. Sorry, I'm whizzing through this, just time. That's kind of slipped in there, but it's a really important point. We can't do any of this without going back to that point I mentioned earlier about looking at equity and decolonising. So really challenging that perception of identity. Who are we? Whose voices aren't being heard? Whose stories aren't being told? And tackling that head on with the people who are funding, making, promoting films. So we're not going to get far if we don't do that effectively. And then what we think, we hope, is that all of this work will come together to form a more recognisable brand. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a physical brand, but it's a flexible space where we know what is Welsh, we inspire, we create, and essentially improve perception internationally of what it means to be Welsh and to be seen on screen with connections to Wales. And that's it. I hope that makes sense. It's a lot. It was really, really hard to condense like 8 years into, and I've probably gone over 10 minutes.
It's all right, don't worry, Hannah. I think that's fascinating stuff. We were going to kind of discuss each thing as we go along, but I think we'll maybe, if you can hand the clicker on to Lynn.
Good luck.
But it's really fascinating. I mean, that's a root and branch kind of overall industry project, and this is a story of a single title, essentially. I mean, there are roots to it, and probably no better place to discuss it as well than the Watershed as well. So, are they up okay? Well, yeah. if you wanna get started, you wanted to ask who was in the room, did you?
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of. It's always just kind of nice to know who you're talking to. Like,
in terms of exhibitors or?
So hands up,
Yeah.
who's an exhibitor in the room?
Yeah.
Thank you. Hands up, who's production? Anyone from production? See you at the back there. Thank you for coming.
Just one.
And other? Any others? Yeah, okay, a couple of others. Thank you. So tell us about Bait. Tell us about how it happened. Who wants to go first?
Or just, I don't know, whether briefly first who we are. So we're Early Day Films. Kate and I have been based in Bristol for 20 years now. We are Bristol-based, and we're resolutely Bristol-based, intentionally Bristol-based as a production company, which is quite unusual. We came up through the short film culture, produced a short film with Esther May Campbell here, and then started, which got a BAFTA in 2009, and then set off on that features journey. And Bait, made in Cornwall on a micro budget, was our first feature that got released in 2019. And
yes, and because when we started on the journey of making Bait, so we knew that we were doing something that we were super interested in doing, in making a hand processed film with Mark, who we knew through shorts and through working together. But right from the very beginning, we knew we were doing something that we loved, but we had no idea how it was going to work once we'd made it. And so from very early on, Lynn and I had lots of conversations about how you reach your audience and what the relevance of our regionality was, working in not just this very particular way with Mark as a filmmaker, but also the story that we were telling, which was very specifically from the inside out, sort of and
I think that was important, wasn't it? It wasn't just something that was set in Cornwall. It was a story that was about people who lived in Cornwall.
Yeah,
which is where you think about identity comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we actually went out to finance with the pitch that we felt pretty good that we could do well in Cornwall. And we used to talk a lot about Bronco's House, which was a long short that Mark had made that he'd hand processed, which is a beautiful film. And part of our pitch was that we took out a 35mm print of that to show people when we were raising interest. And then Brown Willie, which is a film made by the Harvey brothers, Simon and Brett, and they'd just gone out and made a film, sort of they
super micro budget,
confounded everybody, made this stoner pic that was funny and incredibly beautiful, and when you watch it you just get lost in the landscape of Adam Lairty's photography, and it's a wonderful film. And their way of self-distributing was something that we spoke with them about a lot.
So we got inspired. I mean, they went out and they were selling out in local cinemas. They were doing long runs in local Cornish cinemas. So we knew we could sell it in Cornwall. I mean, and that was our starting point. And that's where I think it was just interesting knowing who's exhibitors. It's really important to know that we were having really early conversations with some of the local exhibitors in Cornwall, just starting that story about this film was going to be made and it was going to be available. We knew that Bronco's House had sold out. We knew that this was selling out. We knew that a small farming documentary made in West Penwith, which is the very, very end of Cornwall, had sold out in the cinemas and had people come. So we knew that there was something that people liked to see their place on the screen.
Yeah, and we also started to notice things like if you went to cafes, there'd be piles of DVDs of films that locally and to everybody were not considered necessarily to be brilliant, but they'd fly off the shelves because people wanted to have and own something that was from their place and their stories. And so we recognised that if we could find the way to bring that to be part of our story and our journey, that would be good. And this was at the point before we knew that we were going to find the distribution partners that we found in BFI Distribution, which was amazing, because when we were talking to BFI Distribution and we were talking about our roots and how we felt the story could could grow through its local and regional network. They completely got it. And in parallel, we were having conversations with Maddie and Mark here at the Watershed, you know, because the Watershed's our local cinema. So we were around quite a bit. And, you know, so when we began to realise that there were connections that could be made in terms of help, really.
Yeah. I think, God, I can't remember I had my glasses on so I can read my slides. I think it was, for us, the strategy when we were going out, even before distribution, that the regionality was really important. That, yes, we had something unique in the way it was made, but also really unique in the way that it was a film that it was absolutely of its environment. The story was very, very specific, global in a way, but also incredibly specific. And so I think just in terms of everything that we were getting ready, just making sure that we were just curating, and I think this goes back to what you were saying and what Film Hub did here in the Southwest, which was brilliant, which was, once we got distribution, was help us curate that pack so that it's really clear for you as exhibitors what story you're telling about the film. And I think that really helped us.
Yeah, and Lynn was able to get to some of the exhibitor meetings that were happening regionally. And for producers, that was like eye-opening. Yeah. It was really important that we could get in the room and see and hear what was happening. Because when you start being a film producer, you don't think that you need to understand that much about how exhibition works, but you do. And it was really... It was a really key way to begin to figure out how those connections between producer and exhibitor could work, and how the conversation grows, not just around your film or a collection of films or the curation that happens around your local cinema, but culture and you know, sort of, and everything that you were saying again about identity and stories, both told and untold, universal, global, local, you know, sort of where class fits into it, where everything.
Yeah. You know. And I think, because Maddie is here from Southwest Hub, and it was really eye-opening for me as a producer, because it's like the end product. That's that's the link. The exhibitors are the link, and the things that we learned when we went down on that was, you know, there was one cinema that had just opened a year before, and they said, if you'd brought us this film a year ago, I don't think our audiences would have watched it, but now we've nurtured them and groomed, I don't like to use the word groomed, but they'd got the audiences to a point where they trusted them as an exhibitor, and so the exhibitor could say, hey guys, I think this would be a really interesting film for you to watch, and meeting everybody there, the Southwest vibe really started to feel like it was growing.
Yeah, and then that connected to the work that BFI Distribution were able to do in other regions, you know, sort of, and so we got the sense that in starting from that small place, there was this whole network that you could begin to work through, you know, sort of, and whether that was big cinemas, small cinemas, or film clubs. You know, we started to be interested in film clubs, and
skip to the BFI. Yeah, I mean, sorry, it just everywhere it gets talked about as a Cornish feature, and I think that was really important that got picked up on, and that word of mouth. But I'll do the BFI slide there. So the turbocharge.
Yeah. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah.
You know, that suddenly, yes, with Stuart and Julie and Laura, we were talking about how we could move the film literally up country. You know, sort of from its place in Newlyn, which is where Mark's based, and we know people love his films and come out endlessly to see them. How we could kind of grow the thing up country, and you know, sort of, so everybody's networks and hubs became important, and BFI were fantastic in having those connections, being able to point us in the right direction, and then the idea of how you take your story through the people who made the film out became really important, didn't it? And you know, sort of, Mark's just brilliant at turning up and talking about the film. And so, as we started to talk about releasing the film, we were building around
Mark being out, and it's fairly usual for directors to go out for a couple of weeks and support the film, but because of the work we were doing with Tiffin and Maddie, we were able to identify so many more places, and this idea of no venue too small, no run too short started to form as a compelling thing. And Mark, sort of particularly, sort of in the southwest, would tip up and talk, and the film. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm just saying, if you're one of the cinemas that chooses to have one of those previews, it's hugely important. It's so important to get that word of mouth, and that's where theatrical screening is so important, because that is the thing that really grows everybody talking about something. And we were sort of saying when we were talking earlier, there was this thing that at one point Bait just felt like it had been taken off us and taken down the street, in a big crowd of people going yay, and it's like it wasn't, and that only happens when people have a joint experience, I think, of seeing it in the cinemas. Yeah. And just statistically, normally the Southwest accounts for 4.9% of UK box office on average, and for Bait it was 35%. And where's Mark Cosgrove? Mark Cosgrove, champion of the watershed and programming, was brilliant, and but that's why it's that connection between the filmmakers and the exhibitors is so important, because Mark was sort of saying, no, we've got it, it's in the smallest cinema, and I'm afraid, but we had notices up on Totterdown, our local, we had notices up saying go see it this week. But I think if there is that connection between exhibitors and filmmakers, then we can start sort of saying we'll get people in, and if there's enough, then it comes into Screen 1. So
it went into Screen 1 straight away after.
I know you.
Once I saw the advanced sales, it was like what I'd said was, look, Kate and Lynn, you've made a fantastic film, great success in Berlin. There's a lot of enthusiasm for it, but I've got to be a bit realistic. So I, still a black and white Academy ratio.
You were setting our expectations.
So I started managing expectations, opened it, and I said I'll put it small screen. Success will be, we'll maybe get into Cinema 3. The second thing is that we might do a holdover. 12 weeks later, and 40 grand later. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's a huge success.
So what you're saying, Mark, is you were against the title, and
he tried to squash it.
I was certainly not against it, but I was doing the kind of managing what the box office. Who knew Academy ratio, black and white, Rolex, handmade, about Cornish second homes would be a success in the way that it was, but it was having the flexibility to be able to respond, and that's key for an exhibitor.
Right.
Is having that ability to respond.
And I think it just also having that time to kind of, it went out on 23 screens, 24 screens, and then, so Stuart from Beer. Yeah.
Every week it ramps up, got bigger. It's the second biggest theatrical release we've ever done. But you can't guess what the biggest one is. Blade Runner.
Blade Runner! I fell take that.
Never heard of it. I mean, there's a couple of $100 grand in it.
We'd better. With that triumph, I'm conscious of time.
Yeah,
so,
sorry.
Do you want?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, here, pass the clicker on to me, and I'll. I think we'll maybe get some questions through Mentimeter later on. Is that all right? Yeah. I shall just go through Collective, which is an initiative by Film Hub to connect local audiences to local films for local people. Collective is the product of recognising that the Northern Ireland film industry is about 25 years old. You may have heard of a programme called Game of Thrones, which kind of gave a kickstart. But we are now banging out features like A Car Factory, and our concern was that people were not seeing these features, and especially rural audiences weren't getting a chance to access and engage with them. So we set up these collective tours, and you can see, so you'll know Northern Ireland, Belfast, Derry, those are the main sort of urban areas, and then everything else is essentially rural or small towns. And so we, through the Film Hub network, have set up this collective tour network, which works. There we are. So here's some of the titles that we have shown on the collective initiative. Gaza, which was made by Northern Irish filmmakers, a documentary about Gaza. Bad Day for the Cut, Bump Along the Way, Dig, are all Northern Ireland Screen funded. First Feature, that is their scheme there. All very successful. Bump Along the Way, I should say, has an all-female creative crew as well. And so what we basically do is we connect talent. We book them through rural audiences, then we bring talent to the screenings, and we engage for a number of different reasons. One of the main reasons that we thought that this was important is because the film industry is often talked about in Northern Ireland as a success story, and it is a success story. But we felt, talking to members, is that sometimes they felt quite isolated and unengaged with what was actually being made, or films that were happening or being filmed in Northern Ireland using Northern Irish talent. And so the collective tries to bridge this gap. So, for example, something like The Dig, we took the directors and the producer down to Fermanagh, where one of them was from, which is always a useful sort of thing. And 200 people came out to talk to them. Schools turned up. They did workshops with the schools and things like that. So it's not only about screening, but it's also that wider ecosystem that joins in with it. We've done a bit of survey and evaluation around it, and it has been a very kind of successful brand that we've created through Film Hub work and through fan work. And it's something that we're going to develop, into the next year. We are screening at the moment a film called Nowhere Special. I was in Newcastle Community Cinema on Sunday night last in the middle of a storm, which was a lot of fun. It was freezing cold, but 90 people came out on a Sunday night to watch a film, a very quiet film made by Roberto Pasolini that had already had a theatrical run, but it was sort of during the summer and during COVID times. And so this has given it a new life, and he's very involved in it, and all the actors who are all Northern Irish are involved in turning up at screenings and so on. So it is that sort of nature of connecting the work that's been done in our community and being funded by our communities with those communities and giving them a chance to actually engage and screen with them. And I mean, the overall objective is to create that link and to bridge that gap between production and exhibition. So that's collective. And do we have any questions from the Mentimeter, Nicola? The Mentimeter will speak.
We have one question, which is, did Mark Kermode's support of Bates seem to make a significant difference?
Question from...
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, sort of, and what was wonderful was, you know, sort of like Lynn was saying, how the story grew. You know, sort of when we took the film to Berlin, you know, so we worked with the festival agency who worked with us on a festival screening strategy, and we took a decision early on, because there was no sales agent attached and no distributor attached, that we'd try and hold back and see if we could get into a big festival, and if not, then there were any number of smaller festivals we could work at, because, you know, sort of as producers, you sort of know that if you can make a good film, and you know, that's well written, well made, with a great cast, then you've got a batting chance at getting a good review. And so we wanted to see what would happen if we could get the film reviewed. It was that simple, because there was nothing behind us at that point. And so when we went to Berlin with no sales agent, Lynn and I just wrote to every journalist we could think of, and the hook we used was the hook we used that we were the only UK film in Forum that year. And I'd been writing to one of the Guardian journalists, and he got back in touch just before the festival and said, yeah, it's going to get a review. And so we were like, phew, we're going to get a review in a broadsheet paper. And it was Peter Bradshaw's review that just kicked the whole thing off. And so it was everybody's reviews, you know, sort of, and we left Berlin with some extraordinary reviews under our belt from Screen Daily and various film magazine titles, and then Mark became involved in a number of different ways, you know, sort of in part because of his connection with BFI and his relationship with BFI distribution, and so the conversation with Mark started really once we knew that BFI distribution were going to distribute us.
Is something like Champions because we often talk about champions of film and things like that. It must. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't turn it away, but is it a very useful thing for a title?
Yeah, I mean, it was really useful. We kind of knew that he'd seen the short film, so we knew that he liked that the filmmaking of the filmmaker Mark Kermode, and again, it's that thing of, for us, it was just like using any local champion, using anybody locally. So our lead actor had a 35,000 Twitter following, so okay, let's get it on there. But yeah, he gently started talking more and more about it. Of course, it makes a difference because he just crosses
Hana,
it over into the mainstream. And
I was going to ask, in terms of Made in Wales, is champions, is that something you would have as a strategy? I mean, I know Forrest Whitaker did a lot of work for you in the summer.
Yeah, it was free as well.
And it was free, all free for Forrest, yeah.
No, I think it's something we've talked about before. I think we've always sort of carefully considered who that might be. I think, for example, Interfilm Cymru are quite successful. They have quite a few local champions, and that works really well for them. So it is something that we've considered, but not something that we've done to date. I think partly it goes back to, I mean, it's sometimes quite difficult to put into words, isn't it, what that value is. Yeah. So when you're thinking about exhibition and you're trying to say to somebody, this is what the value of this is and what you're offering, I think it's partly that, and partly thinking that strategy through. But for us, Made in Wales has definitely evolved in cycles. So we started out with the very, very basic, let's financially get films onto screens. And then at each sort of year or 2 year point, we've always taken stock and added something new. And I think that if we brought champions in, I think what I'd like to be is probably at the next level to where we are. And that does require investment. If we did have a national film magazine and we had all this buzz going, at that point, I think a champion could really help to give it voice. But do you know what I mean? You need that structure there to be able to then give that person something to work with.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think sort of who that person is. It's about the mechanism as well, and going back to the Mark Kermode question. Mark was extraordinary because his audience is so mainstream, and when you find the champion that can help trigger you into the next bit of your reach, that's they become the important.
He also
ones.
lives in the area.
Yes, exactly.
Because one of the things is quite interesting about Northern Irish film champions, and we have a number of them, is they very often don't live in Northern Ireland. So they're actually sort of coming back after 25 years or that sort of stuff. And whilst their help is always brilliant, that sort of authentic kind of, this is the community that I come from and I work with, is maybe has added value. And maybe added authenticity, maybe.
Yes, yeah.
Also, people who are unknown can be champions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're particularly interested in, as I've said, is telling the stories that are very much unknown and untold. And those people have something equally important to say. So I think, if you look at somebody like Rangani Naoni, who I spoke about I'm Not a Witch earlier, her story is so interesting. But you could argue, actually she wasn't given as much exposure at that early stages, but she got BAFTA-winning shorts. She did a lot of work before that first feature and has a very interesting and inspiring story to tell. And she is, is known. And I think if you look at people when they're really coming through and give them that platform to review and talk about films and be involved in that sector, in the sector in any point in their career, I just think that's really valuable as well. So just kind of thinking about what we mean by champions and what it is that they do for us is useful.
I am conscious that we are eating into the social lives of our guests tonight. Lynn, Kate, thank you very much for coming along. Hannah, thank you very much for talking about Made in Wales. It's been a pleasure. I should do a bit of housekeeping now for the next event. So from here, you can go to We the Curious. Is that right? So I'll give you the directions. Turn right, go along the harbour, turn right again into Anchor Square and straight on, and you'll find it. And there you will have drinks. What was that?
Go to the big silver ball.
Go to the big silver ball. Go towards the Orgasmatron. And then there's, we got 2 full dome screenings provided by Live Cinema UK, supported by XR Stories, and those are showing at 6:30 and 7:15. So you should go and see those for the vision of the future. But yeah, thank you both. Thank you all for taking part, and thank you all for listening. And we'll see you on day 2.